The ride of your life is daddyhood.
For those of you who cannot wait and love daddyhood, please head over to our Patreon. We have exclusive access to episodes, we have early access to episodes, and we have behind the scenes footage. Head on over there, sign up, be part of the exclusive daddyhood group, and join us over there. Welcome back to Daddyhood, Season 1, Path to Parenthood. I am so excited for today's guest. Liz, welcome to Daddyhood.
Thank you for having me.
Liz is a veteran entertainment executive, host, and fixture in the LA scene. She is currently the executive director of entertainment and FYC at Condé Nast and hosts the podcast Cool, Cool, Cool. Liz often appears on SiriusXM and the Taylor Streckler Show. When she's not running FYC campaigns at Vanity Fair or recording her podcast, Liz is a board member of the LPAC, which is...
LPAC, which is the first and only non-binary and queer female identifying focused political PAC.
I love that.
I know.
Incredible. So Liz, before we start,
yes,
I'm practicing my dad jokes.
Oh, good. I love it. I love a dad joke.
Here we go. Liz, what kind of key is used to open bananas?
I don't know. That's a tough one. Oh, God.
A monkey.
Oh.
Get it?
God, you have to be Swift, and I'm not, clearly.
Swift or a dad. One of the two. I'm so excited to have you on because I think, obviously when we got to talking about both of our own fertility journeys, there's a lot that we have in common, but there's also a lot of differences.
Yep.
But I think before we get into all of that, you're positioned really well to speak on sort of the culture and where we're at right now as a society. We live in very interesting times, both in the queer community, but also just, I feel like what fertility, IVF, and surrogacy means to everyone in our country. What is like the current landscape? Not both politically, but socially, how are people feeling? What's going on?
Yeah.
Break it down for me.
Well, I think we're in an interesting place because if you kind of look at something from a positive and a negative standpoint, I think the attacks on IVF treatments in some of our more red states, saying that embryos are, considered full life, which whatever, we won't get too far down that, but it's finally in the zeitgeist. People are actually talking about IVF. People are talking about what are the difference between IUI, IVF, what is a sperm donor? What is not a sperm donor? We're just talking about it. So I think from a kind of 360 point of view, or if we really take a step back, it's actually great. We're finally talking about something that's been going on for a very, very long, long time. Technology is really advancing. I mean, again, I'm trying to look at, I think, as you know, you kind of have to look at everything positive and negatively.
Yeah.
Or the negative, you have to find the positive, I should really say, because I think this whole journey is a journey, and some things you're like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, etc., right? And so technology has really advanced in regards to IVF for anybody doing it. You can do a ton of genetic testing. You can do testing of the embryos. It's like really getting us into this really amazing place. But like insurance companies are saying that some of that technology isn't like tested enough, right? Like it's all these different things where you're like, okay, but you're actually covering, like some of my insurance is covering what I'm going through, and I didn't have to, again, positive, because I'm a queer woman in a queer marriage, I didn't have that to my insurance agency was a cause for, quote, infertility, which is really interesting, right?
Yeah.
But then they won't pay for sperm thawing.
Right.
They're like, but can't you get the live sperm? I'm like, well, but I really should have a sperm donor, and that would mean it would come from a bank. And they're like, but we won't cover it. So I think that society is catching up with the fact that these methods and this science and this technology is helping a ton of people, queer and not queer, single parents, coupled parents, whatever, late in life parents, early parents, like who knows? But I think generally speaking, IVF has become a part of culture for the first time, really. I think personally, more celebrities are talking about it. You're talking about, you have a whole show about, your journey. It's it's kind of cool. Even if that means that because it's a part of the zeitgeist, you have folks trying to dismantle it.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting point to me is, you know, the road to parenthood is not always straight.
No.
And it's had its challenges like it has for you and it has for Jordan and I as well. And I think one thing that I've seen a lot, especially from our own community, which is sort of shocking, is they're very quick to judge and say, oh, but there's adoption and but there's, you know, foster care system. And I love that. And I've had guests on from the foster care system and people who have used the foster care system and adoption. And I think that's incredible. But at what point is it that family's decision to make on how they want to expand their family and sort of staying out of people's business?
I mean, 100%. I think everybody has. It's so interesting that you bring that up. I went to this birthday party, I don't know, like 8 or 9 months ago, and it was mostly lesbian women that I look up to for advice, and they've all gone through different methods of having a family. But the second I said that Rachel and I were starting our journey, it was like unsolicited advice.
Yeah.
All the time. It's like, well, you should do this and you shouldn't do that and you should do this. And that is also, I think, whether it's well-intentioned or not, it can be really overwhelming and really harmful. Listen, I've been told I have not been gay enough since the second I
You and me both. I mean,
you know what I mean? I think
yes.
you and I have like a lot of that in common, right? It's like, especially since I had very successful relationships with men in the past. I think men are gorgeous. Like, do you want to have a kid? Just kidding. Old fashioned way. Just kidding. Jordan, who's upstairs. You know what I mean? It's like, I've never been gay enough, or then I've been like too gay to be straight. It's like a bunch of like unwarranted, and again, unsolicited opinions, right?
Yeah.
So when I started to say, you know, originally I was really hopeful that I could do IUI, which is essentially, for lack of a better term, like assisted turkey basting, if you will. Yep. That's what I had to tell my mother, who like refuses to listen to anything I say when it comes to this. And I was really hopeful about that. And a lot of people were like, it doesn't work. But then I had all of these people who said it worked right on the first try. You know, I've had Whitney Mixter on my show who's like, oh my God, I did it one and done. Great. For me, my age, really thinking about how I want to build a family and the options. Yeah. It doesn't sound like that's going to work for me, right?
Right.
But now I've become so guarded in what I'm sharing with people, because when I had that kind of first interest and excitement and went to my queer friends and told them, they told me everything I was doing was wrong, or this would work and this wouldn't. And I think, you know, adoption is also very difficult for queer people, regardless of your status. I think a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of agencies won't adopt.
Especially depending on what state you're adopting.
Correct.
That's what people don't realize. It's not a federal mandate. It's state by state based now.
Yes.
So the complications in the adoption process are great. I mean, I have a friend out here who did it, and they were adopting, and the mother that they were working with with the adoption was out of Texas. And Texas has a 72-hour, I believe. I could be misspeaking here, but they have a certain window after birth that the mother can basically pull the plug on the entire contract, everything. Yeah. And just say, nope, change my mind, and like, I want to have the baby now. Even though that parent and the intended parents out here had been paying for food stipends and, of course, and making all of the plans in their lives to have that child, it can change like that. So I think there's complications.
California too, I think they can, and in the state of Nevada, because my old teacher from journalism school has adopted many children. And I remember, unfortunately, she was really open, and she shared her story about how it was the same thing. I think it was even more devastating, like a couple weeks. And that, listen, again, everybody has the right to change their mind or do whatever. Like, I'm not in anybody else's circumstance.
Oh no, I was saying hours after birth. So they pulled
No, that's same with my teacher. Weeks after birth.
Weeks after birth.
Which is devastating because the kids came in. That's what I mean. It's like, you and I don't know, but that is so difficult and so hard and a financial strain on people. Totally. People don't Also, like, it's none of your business.
Well, so that's my whole thing on like the current culture of where we're at, as far as like, I've heard it already since launching Daddyhood of like, the privilege that you have with all this. And like, while I can acknowledge that, there's also this way of like, this was our decision on how we wanted to go about our loving family and how we wanted to grow. And we put a game plan together that was healthy for us. And it's still been really, really challenging. And for when people come in to sort of tear it down, we're just like, we've been through so much in our own path, and we understand people have been through their own journeys too. And it's hard, but it goes back to my whole thing. It's like, traumas were not meant to be compared. And you can't.
I love that. Yeah.
You cannot keep comparing traumatic events to other people's traumatic events. We're all like doing our best at life right now.
I mean, listen, by you having me sit behind a desk whilst in a podcast means you are trying to undo the trauma of me sitting in a chair and being recorded. And I would just like to thank you here and now, because this is the most feminine. I'm like, woo, I can just sit and be comfortable at a podcast.
Let's get into it. So your journey with your wife.
Yeah.
How are you? How has it been?
Sure. I mean, it's taken a lot longer. You and I were texting. It's taken a lot longer than I thought. Yeah. Like, I think that...
What's that look like? How many months? How many years?
Like a year. Yeah. Like it started a year ago. So the pandemic really, like many people, sort of completely screwed up my timeline. I got married in October. Wow, I should know when I got married. October of 2019. And I was like, cool. We'll be married for a year and then we'll go and start trying to have a baby. And back then I was 34 turning 35. It was like perfect, and we all have this plan and this vision. And I think especially for queer people, sometimes my wife actually always says this. It's like you kind of develop a little bit late. It takes you a little bit of time to figure things out. Right. And so, a lot of my heterosexual friends, started having kids in their late 20s. I wasn't ready to have a kid in my late 20s. And quite frankly, probably at 35 wasn't. Maybe it all worked out the way it did. So we went through the pandemic. I got this big job at Condé Nast. I wanted to really settle in, and it's challenging. What I do for work is hard. It's a lot of time, and it's a lot. So I need to get through a couple of Oscar seasons, and like now I just know I have to sleepwalk through them. But so a year ago, I'm like, we really need to start. And I know this sounds so crazy, and who knows what this is going to sound like to somebody who doesn't know me, but I wanted to go to Montana so I could ride horses one last time. I'm like, I can't start getting pregnant because we go to Montana in the summer. I'm like, I got to go to Montana and ride horses.
You can't ride horses pregnant?
Hell no.
Oh, okay.
Hell no. You cannot.
Got it.
Like, no way, Jose, which is devastating. So I was like, I want to go drink red wine and go to Montana and then I'll start. But then... well, you got to pick a sperm donor for us. And we partnered with Seattle Sperm Bank, which is a sperm bank in Seattle. There's tons of them. There's tons of different ways you can acquire sperm. You can go to your friends. You can go wherever. For us, we were very blessed with having a lot of lovely men in our life offer. But after really kind of thinking about it, for us, having someone also in LA didn't really make sense. So we said, you know what, we'll go sperm donor. Great. Well, that takes a long time to find a donor, as you know. I mean, it's dating.
And the legal paperwork.
Testing.
Yep. And how many sperm donors have you gone through?
To look through?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Or got tested and went down the road. Did you?
We ended up just one, but because here's the worst part is that we would find someone we would like. Yeah. And I am not exaggerating. We would sit there, go through it, really talk about it, really read their profiles. And then the next morning, all their sperm's gone. And you have to start again. Yeah. And I'm like, oh no. Yeah. Oh my God. What are we going to do? So we had kind of narrowed it down to 5 or 6. And it's baby pictures.
So I want to talk on that because this is where it gets interesting. For people who don't know, when we go through the egg donor process, we have a whole beautiful portfolio. We have 9 or 10 pages just of health and education and questionnaires. We also have 12 photos of everything from childhood photos to current photos to a video to all of this access to the women that we're choosing our egg from. Yeah. When I first learned that sperm donors do not have to submit all of that, and sort of the standards are so different.
Yeah.
Depending, I will say this, also depending on where you are
It
getting
is
your
depending
sperm bank
on, yeah.
from. So different companies do great in different things. But that was sort of the common practice was sperm donors only had to submit a baby photo.
But now, okay, so this is what's so crazy about timing. And I was thinking about it in the car driving over here, and I'm like, you know what? Actually, really, timing is everything, because we kept going through these sperm donors. We were looking at their baby pictures. Also, it's kind of weird to be like, is this baby going to be hot? It's like, what? What are you even saying? I was a beautiful child. Let's just... I really, really was.
I love this.
I mean, I was like stunning cherubic, I baby modeled. I was a beautiful child. Some of these guys, they weren't so beautiful. Some of them were, some of them weren't. I was kind of like, oh my God, I don't know. And we kept looking, we kept stalling. And then for me, from a testing perspective, we went to a fertility doctor in the Valley, and they lost all of my blood work.
Wow, so you had to start over.
So I had to start over. That means you got to start your next period. So everything kept pushing back. Then we wanted to change doctors. You have to get on a waiting list. It is, competitive. So things kept stalling. And then there was one donor, or I got an email on Christmas Eve, maybe Christmas Eve or the day after Christmas from the bank. And it said, New Year's Day will be releasing select adult photos. And I was like, okay, what's 5 days? Let's wait. And so then we were able, and Rachel was like, I really like this one donor. He's a total athlete, which I was like, okay. Well, I mean, I'm like, that's
Rachel
better.
and I would have some stuff in common as we made our selections.
You would. And I was like, okay, whatever. Of course, me, I'm going, artsy, whatever. And she said, I really think you should look at this one guy. And I kind of looked over. I'm like, I don't know. Because I had a favorite, but he had a lot of, he was honest, which I really appreciate. He had a lot of alcoholism in his family, and so do I. And so I was like, I don't know if we want to double down here on that, which is great when they're honest. And there was this other guy, and he seemed kind of great. And we're like, maybe him. And I was like, I don't know about this baby picture. And then lo and behold, the adult photos came on the first day of the year. And we sat there, and the one donor that she loved was so handsome, so great. He just looks like a kind guy. He's definitely broken his nose several times. He played college football, baseball, oh my God, and track. He's 6'6".
Wow.
Which seems psychotic.
6'6" with a smushed up nose is sort of hot. So
right? Great. I was like, all right, he'll work.
We love those little
he'll work.
war scars.
And then we go to buy the sperm.
Yeah.
I literally email the bank because I am lucky that I was partnering with them. So I had a little inline.
Now, take it off.
They're like, oh my God, all of it sold except for, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So then we got into this whole thing. We ended up finally buying it. So that was January. But I'm on now. So timeline wise, sorry, this is long-winded because this is long-winded. Timeline, I'm waiting to go see this doctor, and I'm devastated because I'm waiting for her. It's every month goes by, And then there was more sperm, thank God. So I bought more. And then I went to the doctor, and you know what? It all worked out the way it was supposed to work out. She was really kind. She did a lot of additional testing on me.
Yep.
And then she caught something with him. She's like, I want you to do more genetic testing, which is great that we have that science, as I mentioned earlier. And then when you and I met, I had gotten this crazy blood work done that was you're either stressed out or you have a tumor in your brain.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, that's not what you want to hear. So you and I met. I'm like, I got to go blood work done. It all ended up being fine.
Yeah.
Shocking. I was stressed during Oscars week. But, so now where we are in the process is I have a call in a couple of hours to figure out what medication I'm going to take. And then we start.
As you're getting ready for
IVF.
The IVF.
Which apparently is that in and of itself is about a month process.
Yeah.
Which I wasn't really familiar with.
You all have it way harder than two dads do in this process, as far as it goes, as far as physicality. I think, obviously the mental journey is one of its own, and then the physical journey too. And Yeah, I remember very vividly, like obviously our egg donor having to do all of the injections and going through all of that. And I mean, it's hard. So I'm
It is
wishing you
hard.
all of the best luck with that.
Thank you. I had to cancel going to Thailand with 17 gays, and I'm so mad. We were going to be the only like lesbians on the trip with just a bunch of gorgeous gay men in Bangkok, and then going to Phuket to this like amazing villa, and we had to pull out a couple weeks ago because I think it's like even traveling or planning or doing anything is so stressful.
I think it's smart though that you're being you have to be intentional with this. You can't be lackadaisical. Also, you're spending so much money to go through this. You might as well set yourself up for success.
Yeah.
So I think, canceling or changing the trip was
They're never going to invite me again, Colton. It's over. Who's going to invite the lesbians with a kid? Nobody.
You'll get invited again, and it'll be fun. And then you can take your
not
kid
me
with
like
you.
allegedly looking up like, can you take mushroom? No, I'm just kidding. I wasn't doing any of those things. I'm like, will that affect your fertility? No.
Yeah. Well, all right. So let's get into like just some of like the myths and misconceptions you had about the fertility journey, because
Sure.
I, for one, obviously starting this because there was no information out there for gay men. I shouldn't say there was no. It was very hard
Limited,
and
yeah.
challenging for me to find information about somebody being like, this is the steps it takes for, two men to have a baby.
Sure.
So what were some misconceptions that you had when you first started your fertility journey with your wife?
Oh my God. I think everything. And that's why I started my special. I mean, I had already had my show forever, but that's why I started to focus as well and I was so excited when I found your show because no one was really talking about queer fertility journeys on a large scale platform in a way that like found me. You know what I mean? I mean, there's definitely, as you mentioned, there's information out there, but it is limited.
Yep.
And it also feels in some ways a bit archaic. It just wasn't speaking to me. Maybe that's what I should say.
It's also emotionless too. Have you found that? Like,
yeah.
It's sort of like black and white, statistical, number driven. It doesn't really, you sort of feel a little labby with it. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I actually love that you say that because as my wife and I were bickering the other day, which does happen. Like, I think with a lot of this, it's so non-emotional, it's mechanical. It does, unfortunately, take a little bit of the fun out of, like, a lot of people can kind of have the ease of having a fun romp in the sand, or I don't know why I just said that. I need to brush up on my analogies and my daddy jokes.
For straight culture.
Yeah, for like, but it's like basically you have sex and you have like there are odds that you'll get pregnant, And I think like I spent so much time when I was having sex with men trying to not get pregnant. I'm like a kid born and raised in San Francisco from the 90s. I was used protection. I like never, there was a fear of getting pregnant. Now I'm on the other side. I'm in this like loving, dedicated relationship with a woman. And now I'm like, it's nothing but fucking doctor's appointments. Sorry, I don't think you can swear on this podcast. You can bleep it out.
We're fine.
Okay.
We have no rules here.
I would also just like to say I have not cursed one time yet, and I am so shocked with myself. But it does make it a little bit more mechanical. Paperwork. Legal, money. It's like
it's very transactional.
It does feel that way. I mean, again, hopefully it'll all work out. But I think from a misconception perspective, I didn't realize the time. I don't think anyone really tells you about how long that this can potentially take. It depends on everybody, but I know for you like learned about your sperm quality, so then it was like, okay, like I got to focus on myself. Same thing for me, I was like, oh, okay, well, like, am I fertile? Like, can I get this doctor appointment? It's just the time I don't think anybody really talks about.
Yep.
And that's actually a huge part of all of this.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you should start a year in advance if that's what, like, go to Montana and drink the wine and go to Bangkok with the gays because it's going to take a while to do. I think also misconception was the donor process. I don't think people talk about that enough, actually.
About how weird it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's because we try to like justify and normalize it in our heads. We're like, this is not a normal process. No. I had to say to myself so many times, I don't want to play God in this process. But On the other hand, this is why, like, you know, I try not to speak in definitives anymore because I change my opinion and I go back and forth on certain things. But, you know, you're spending all this money. So you want to make the decisions that you want to make and that will be best for what you feel like will be best for your family and set you guys up for success.
Sure.
Set you and your family up for success. But at the same time, it gets to be a little overwhelming where you're like, oh, there's so many decisions that I can make to go into this. I don't just, at the end of the day, what is like the healthiest decision for my family? So it's like, how did you balance, you know, you let us in a little bit to your selection process.
Yeah.
So how did you and your partner balance like going back and forth on what was important to you in a donor?
Yeah, that's such a great question.
And where did you meet in the middle? Did you give in more to her? Did she give in more to you?
I know. And that's the thing, right? Is we at first had we took advice actually from some dear friends of mine who went through this process, a lesbian couple. And they said that they went through the portal. By the way, how many portals am I? I'm like constantly in a portal.
Yes.
Portal. And then just like the person. And if you really don't like that person, unclick that person. That was their kind of game, so to speak. Again, it's almost like online dating, which is gamified and quite strange.
Yes.
We had different. So this is so funny. And I've never talked about this before. So daddyhood exclusive. All of the donors that I picked like looked like you and me.
Oh.
They were like blonde or like sandy blonde with like blue-green eyes. I'm like, pick. And I don't know if that's just because you're like used to what you look like or your brothers or your sisters.
Can I ask you this?
Yeah.
Did you pick the men that you were attracted to?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did.
And how did that conversation go with your wife?
Okay, hold on. But then but those are two different things because then I would see these like hot Latino dudes and I'm like, boom, boom. But again, I'm also looking at babies, which is so weird.
Yes.
And then she was pretty funny because she like would look at the selections and be like, dude, you're just picking like nothing but people that look like you and your sibling. Like you're a weirdo. I'm like, well, it's what I know. Like, I don't know. Like, I guess that is pretty narcissistic and strange. And then we would look at other guys. I mean, she did the same thing. She'd be like, oh, I think he's going to be hot. I mean, we're like normal in that way. I mean, there wasn't like, you can't be sexually attracted to like, you know, a child photo or that's crazy. So that
But the whole process is it's hard. It's really hard. But and I mean, now you guys at least had the option to look at adult photos too.
Right, like which was great because...
But when I say adult too, because this is another misconception. When you say adult, still in their 20s, by the way. It's not like you get to see them in their 30s and 40s. Maybe with sperm donors you do. But for egg donors, because the doctors say like, you know, after 24, the egg quality starts to go down. So we're making judgments off of, you know, 24 and younger women. Yeah,
I mean, our donor is in his 20s. Oh, some of them weren't, which was crazy to look at some of those photos. But I think the adult photos are so important.
Yeah,
they really are, or like teenage or whatever, because people do change. And I think, you know, you bring up a great point about not wanting to play God, but it's also your family and your decision. I grappled with that a little bit as well, where I'm like, wait, am I like being a jerk? Am I being superficial? Am I being narcissistic and picking like blonde, blue-eyed, green-eyed, you know, people? But like, guess what? That's my decision.
Yeah.
It's also my decision if I was in a heterosexual situation to sleep with whoever I want to sleep with.
Right.
Though the one thing I will say is when you fall in love with someone, sometimes things that would be on paper that you would look at like dissolve because you know that person for who they are. You know their personality.
Yeah.
We were able to listen to audio recordings. So it's not video, it's audio. And those were also quite helpful because in the beginning, it was just Dungeons and Dragons. I am not kidding you. Every single donor was like, oh, what do you like to do in your spare time? I love RPG games and Dungeons and Dragons. I'm like, dude, I'm definitely cool, but like, I don't know about Dungeons. Like, you know what I mean? It's just started to be just like, whoa, this is weird. Like, I like swords. I'm like, what? Like, who are these guys? Like,
where are they finding these men?
Yeah, well, they're finding them at engineering, you know, wherever in Seattle. But Finally, when we landed on the last couple that we were considering,
What were they into?
they were into like traveling,
Cool.
music, sports.
Great.
You know, also I'm like, what were their SAT scores? Because guess what? I'm very creative, but I flunked my math SATs. So like, let's make sure this person did great on standardized testing and is like a well-rounded person.
Yeah.
So I would just say, to go back to your original question about misconceptions, it's like all the things we're talking about. It wasn't necessarily a misconception. It was just complete lack of knowledge.
Yeah. It's a free-for-all.
It's a free-for-all. It is a free-for-all.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, so now that you're getting ready to do, IVF, have you talked to your doctor about what a mock cycle is?
No,
when
what's
you
that?
do a transfer? So you have not made embryos yet.
No, because
So you
this is
still
my
have to-
first.
This is your egg retrieval.
Yes.
I highly recommend mock trials, at least just because in our experience, it costs obviously more money. And you were talking about insurance earlier. Like, our insurance didn't cover anything, so we sort of had to make every decision knowing it was coming out of pocket. But what a mock cycle did was it gave our doctor more information about how a body was receiving before the medication, before the transfer. Yeah. So it really lets you dial in that medication to be perfect.
Got it.
Or not perfect, but optimize your body to the best of its abilities to get it ready for the transfer.
Oh.
So some steps ahead.
So you could basically, and also, again, this is why I love your show. This is why I love talking to people.
You could basically simulate all the way up to the embryo transfer. And then you get your body right, and you don't do the transfer, but the doctors could study, thickness of walls and how you're just all of the science that is needed in the information. I recommend it just because for us too, we only have 3 embryos. So we only have a small, we don't have a lot of room for error. So the more that we can...
You only have 3 embryos because that's all that
our took. So we had 22 eggs, and then we split them 11 and 11. Jordan got 2 and I got 1. So we only have 3 out of that, which I think was slightly below average, but also I think a lot of people need to realize
for a round.
I think what helped me understand it was when our doctors, I was like, wait, why are you disposing of these ones? And they're like, those would have been your miscarriages.
Yeah.
Those would have been the ones that didn't take and maybe not shown up on a pregnancy test at all or been a miscarriage.
Because did they do ICSI?
I think they did everything tested.
Yeah.
Possible.
And just so if people, and this is interesting because I didn't know this because my insurance won't cover ICSI. So what ICSI is it's a method of creating the embryo where they literally take the sperm and they, with a needle, implant it right into the egg for a higher chance. Because the other way that is covered by insurance is where they take the eggs. So
I don't know about how they made our embryos.
I know. See, this is all. Who knew? This is what I'm talking about.
Yes.
No one tells you anything.
No.
So
we just get a report of day 1, and then we get a 3-day report, and then we get a 5-day, and then we get an 8-day, and then we get a 10-day report. And then by that, we get to see how many embryos actually made it. So it's really interesting.
It is really interesting. So the kind of the more traditional way of creating embryos is where they take the sperm and they just release it to the eggs and kind of see, quote, what sticks.
Yeah.
Which is fine. And a lot of people do that. And quite frankly, I think if I was a little younger, I might go that route. But I'm like, yo.
But if they have the science, why not go for the best?
Yeah, I mean, it's financial.
Oh, but because insurance doesn't cover it.
Yeah, but you know what? It's also really interesting when you start to look at these sort of things. I don't know. I mean, I sound like such a boomer, but I look at all these people spending money on the dumbest things. And I'm like, you guys. Yeah. I mean, now my whole life is antique shopping and egg making.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
I'm like, who am I could care less about purses. I have the best purse collection. I used to be so into it.
I spend time on Facebook Marketplace now. I know we're getting way off of the daddyhood stuff.
I'm so sorry. Facebook, by the way, Facebook Marketplace is our life now, and it is daddyhood. It is mommyhood. I'll see you on Facebook.
Yes.
Start
Shout
texting
out
me.
to all of the Facebook Marketplaces and offer-ups. I love it. But yeah, there's just something now going on in our culture, which I think is cool. And look, maybe straight culture has helped now shed light on it just because it is becoming, I hate even using the word mainstream.
Sure.
But a lot more people are talking about IVF and their different paths to parenthood and being open and honest with their struggles, which I think is beautiful and needed just because there are so many struggles.
Yes.
For both men and women. And I think, one thing that I love about your journey is like, even when we first met, you were like, it's fucking hard.
Yeah.
And like, I think there's something powerful just about admitting it. Like, this is hard.
Yeah.
Is it the hardest path that anybody's ever taken? Maybe not, but it's still hard for a human to process this and go through this.
Yeah. And I think, you mentioned IVF becoming mainstream. I think that's okay to say. I think it's interesting. I'm going through IVF alongside two of my straight female friends, and they are doing IVF for very different reasons. We're all actually doing it for different reasons. One has, she and her husband, they have a beautiful, healthy son, but they realized after he was born via genetic testing that they both carry something that like could lead to a really severe physical disability. And like, again, we have a lot of testing these days to help ensure like healthy people in the world, right? Yeah. And so her doctors were like, and she went through a ton of miscarriages, and they're like, hey, she had to get tested, her husband, her in-laws, it's like this whole thing, right? And I had never heard of anything like that. Yeah. And so she is now going through this process because she's having second birth infertility, which is super common, and also because of this genetic stuff. I have another friend who just happens to be older, and they cannot figure out, like, I could go on for hours and hours, but there's like AMH levels, there's FSH. You know this because of your donor, but she's 42, I'm 38. Her AMH, which is apparently like your egg reserve, your egg quality, is like triple mine. Wow. But she is having the hardest time getting pregnant. Yeah. So it's really, and they can't figure out why. And I think so some of it is unknown. There is a lot of information, like you telling me about the mock. Like, I didn't know. Why didn't anybody tell me that? Like, what? You know what I mean?
There's been so many times in this journey when a guest is sitting here, I'm like, why didn't anybody tell me this?
I know.
I would have loved to freeze my sperm in my 20s. Or at least known what supplements or things that I was doing in my life that was killing my sperm. I would have made decisions differently. 100%. If I would have been educated more on it.
I would have, and I say this, it's interesting. I just was on this woman's podcast, and she's 29 or 30, and she's getting married, and she's like, what advice do you have? And I looked at her and I said, are you and your husband or your future husband looking to have kids anytime soon? She's an actor or whatever. Yeah. She's like, no. And I go, great. My suggestion to you is use your Chase Sapphire, whatever it is, credit card, buy all the stuff, use those points for a honeymoon. Do not ask for money for a honeymoon. Ask for money to freeze your eggs, freeze embryos. If that is who you think you want to have children with, freeze your embryos now. And she's like, really? And I go, I promise you that will give you so much freedom and time. Yeah. Like, go have a kid when you're my age, like 38, 39. Like, great. Yeah,
I think that's the other thing is in today's society, families and planning look so much different than it did 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And how we create families obviously is so different. But people are handling their lives and their relationships and their businesses differently. It's a much different world. And I think there's some beauty to that. But I also think people don't quite understand or have all the information on how to set themselves up for success yet. So I love that you said that, because I personally, I would have loved to have frozen my sperm at an earlier age. And I'm not fighting as hard of a biological clock as most women are, but you never know what life is going to throw your way, whether it's terminal illness, whether it's a severe accident that could life is hard. Life is challenging. And I think the more information and the more you can be prepared, the better.
Yeah. And listen, I love that you're doing this show because, your audience is a lot of women of all different backgrounds, a lot of heterosexual women, a lot of queer women. And these kinds of conversations are so important because historically, heterosexual men it's not on their radar. Right. And so I think the more men and women and everyone can have these conversations about how to create a family is better literally for everyone. Yeah. Everyone involved.
My PSA always is women and the gay men out there, test your sperm. Just like women every year, you guys have to go to a specialist to do everything that you guys have to do. I don't even know what all goes in. It's a lot in the most beautiful way.
I can't wait for you two to have a girl. I'm going to will a girl for you.
No, don't do that to me.
Even though I'm trying to will a girl for me because I'm like, no boys allowed. I actually really don't care. I was a nanny for 10 plus years. I've taken care of every type of child on the planet. But I'm willing a girl for you because then you get to deal with like fun
Lord.
Periods and all that
Say a prayer.
stuff. But no, you're
But get tested.
Right.
We have all this amazing science and technology right now. Let's use it.
Well, and also it's like Instagram. Now that we've had this conversation and you've listened to this in your car, hate to break it to you, but you're about to be, every ad for every fertility app is going to come your way. But you're right. It's a blood test. For women, it's actually not that serious. And there's tons of them. I actually, when I first started my journey, I found it on Instagram. I was like, oh, I can't remember the name of it, but like sent it to your house.
The algorithms have gotten so good.
Yeah, they like sent it to my house and I pricked my finger and I did the whole thing. And literally it cost me $80. I know, again, whatever, it's money, but we've all spent $80 wasted in a nightclub on what we thought was Don Julio, and it was actually tequila. So like, guys, it's fine.
Priorities.
Or like, don't ever go to Erewhon because like, let me tell you, $80 is like $4 anywhere else. But I think telling people to get tested is such a great thing to advise folks on, because you're right. Yeah. It's something that I really wish that I had done, I really wish, but here we are.
Well, all right. So before you go, we ask all of our guests, what is one piece of advice or it could be a quote, poem, saying anything beautiful that you want to leave our listeners with?
Oh God, a poem. Could you imagine if I just do people break out into poems? Could you imagine?
Sayings, poems, quotes, spoken word.
Please don't advise your guests to do spoken word, Colton. Oh, brother. I would just say something that I try to do because I'm terrible at it. Yeah. So it's not advice, really. It's something that I'm saying out loud because I hope that it makes me do it. But like, be kind and gentle to yourself. Yeah. Even if you're not trying to have a child, even if you're not on that journey, if you want, just be kind, be patient, be gentle with yourself. I'm so hard on myself. And they always say, treat yourself like you would treat your best friend. You wouldn't say terrible things about your best friend. Don't say terrible things about yourself.
Amen to that.
Be nice.
Stop with the negative self-talk. Yeah. Beautiful.
Is that okay?
Yes. That's beyond okay.
I mean, honestly, I was thinking about breaking out into a Tupac song, but like, I don't know if that's really, this is the time or the place.
Tupac by Daddyhood, the collab we never knew we needed.
It is the collab we needed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
That is a wrap on Daddyhood.
The ride of your life is Daddyhood.